gosh, that's true. In others, whatever's happening to us, I don't care what it is, we embrace it as our greater good, because within what's happening to us actually is our greater good that expresses itself down the road. Does that make any sense? And he calls that the common. And the common, within the common is hidden the uncommon. So what this says to me and to the world itself, and the people who read this book, is that when the door shuts, this is bringing it down to the third dimension, other doors open. Isn't that awesome? And we look at people, even in the health industry, we look at, years ago we had what we called Project Spice. And we had seniors that were at the 24-hour care facility that were up in their ages and were in wheelchairs. And so we came up with the idea of this. Rather than have the perception that I'm useless, nobody wants me anymore, and therefore, what good is life? We presented them with an opportunity for them to make bean bags and other things for kids in the classroom. And we saw 90-year-olds, all of a sudden have a spark in their life and they wanted to participate. We had over 35 seniors doing this years ago. And what this all means to us is that when we change our perception, we change what we're imagining, what we're putting in the universal. And then we will get in kind. Now this is not, and I thought about this is not a recent aha. Everyone knows this, do we not? Back in 400 BC, the ancient philosopher Plato came out with the same idea, and what he said was, I see a more extraordinary being within myself than the one I permit myself to be. Nothing can be more wonderful than to play one's highest part. And so what this month's about is playing our highest part. And what does playing our highest part mean? What do we mean by that? Playing our highest part has to start with how we identify who we are. If we don't start there, we're going to allow the pebbles of the beach, as Marie would say, get to us, and we'll allow that consciousness to take dominion over us. We're here to experience the whole enchilada of this human life. And that means the pebbles on the beach as well as the good stuff too. And the pebbles on the beach are not too bad either, for that matter. So how do we play the biggest part, as Plato said, 400 BC, play the highest part in this drama of life? What's the first step? The first step is to really embrace and accept the fact, no matter what situation is occurring, accept the fact that we are eternal, unformed, unchanging, eternal being with magnificent powers of creativity. That's where it's got to start. And if we start there, and then case by case, situation by situation, we keep that consciousness flowing that yes, I am not under the domain of what's happening to me, the situation that's happened to me. I'm whole and I'm complete, and that's how I play my highest part. There's a story that we can talk about. This doctor had this woman come to him, and he was amazed. This gal looked great. She was really excited, and she looked healthy. And he thought, my God, this is amazing. How could this be? Just a year ago, when I saw her just a while ago, a year ago, she was on life support, and she needed oxygen. And all of a sudden, she's here in my office for her annual physical, and she looks beautiful. What's going on here? And this illustrates the perception that we have that controls our lives. She said, here's what happened. She said, when I was here a year ago, it was on a Thursday, I remember. Your staff came in and you checked my heart. And at that moment, I thought I was dying. My heart was beating fast, and I had pains in my chest, and I thought I was dying. So I put that in mind, and then all of a sudden, I was listening. You and your staff were looking at you, checked my heart, and then you said good things. You said, and you mentioned it so everybody can hear, that, by gosh, she's got a wholesome gallop. Her heart's a wholesome gallop. And I got thinking, my gosh, I am so grateful that I've got a heart that's that strong, that has a wholesome gallop. And so she said, I started thanking God for allowing me to have such a healthy body and a healthy heart. And so I started getting better and I started feeling better. She changed her whole perception of how what's happening and that she was going to die into one of having a beautiful, healthy heart and her gratitude. Well, the doctors didn't tell her what that meant. A wholesome gallop, they call it the third wholesome sound, means that your heart's muscle is losing its energy. It's not functioning properly. And that she was going to die, perhaps. Isn't that interesting? We have such a power over what we do. Let's clap for her. Her name was Gladys. There's an article in Parade Magazine that said that perception can heal us, but it can also kill us. It was written by a guy named Richard Moss. What does that mean? Well, there's a lot of science research going on having to do with that. We are so darn powerful, and we need to accept that. During this month, we accept the fact that we are powerful, and that God is listening. Well, this dimension of all possibilities is listening. And so research shows that if a person's ill, and a person believes that this doctor is going to help him relieve the pain that he's suffering. And once the guy embraces that and accepts that as truth, then his pain will start subsiding. Regardless of whether the pill the doctor gives him is a placebo or not, it really doesn't matter. When we change our perception, we change our life. And there's all kinds of studies. We could spend the rest of the afternoon talking about them. But brain scans show that when we imagine something like skiing, or when we imagine something like playing, bowling, or whatever it is, that part of the brain that's involved with those functions will literally lighten up. It opens up, it lightens up. And that it's as if you're there and doing it right here and right now. During the Vietnam War, the North Vietnamese figured this all out. They figured the way to break the spirit of the American soldier is to put the person in a small cubicle and isolate them. Have nobody around, just isolated. That will break the human spirit. Because then all of a sudden this perception kicks in, and what happens? Oh my God, I'm only, all this negative stuff puts in. But here's a guy, the guy that decided to do differently. His name was Sam as well. I don't know, there's a lot of Sams out there. But he was a Marine, and I need to say that. He was a Marine pilot. He got captured, his plane went down, and he was captured by the North Vietnamese. And he was put in that little cubicle, real little cubicle, and isolated for several years. But here's what he decided to do. He thought about this and he said, they're not going to break me. He said, I'm such a lousy golfer that I'm going to spend the next year or 2 or 3 playing golf in my mind. And I'm going to do this every day. He literally played golf in his mind, sometimes 2 to 3 rounds of golf every day. He recognized, and in his mind, he knew his golf course. He knew the length of each hole and all this stuff. And so he literally practiced every hole, every day. And then at the end of the war, he was finally released, and he called his buddies. He says, I want to challenge you to a golf game. So they have a golf game. And guess what? He beat them, and his score improved 20 points. Wow. My God. He went under 100. He was like 110 or whatever. He went down into the high 80s. And what the point here is that we have these spiritual tools. We have the power that's a flow of the universe itself that will help us transcend any situation, regardless of what it is. If we're in a situation where somebody's making us angry or doubtful or fearful, we have the spiritual tools necessary to transcend that and to realize that, hey, I'm a powerful being, and this magnificence will shine when I allow it to happen. I'm going to close, but I want to talk about perception again. It's kind of interesting. We have what we call the consciousness of separate realities. We all kind of know about that. In other words, we can look at a painting, and one person will say, my God, what a beautiful painting. Someone else will start crying when they see and it may be a snowfall or a mountain. The one person had very good feelings about the painting and loved the snowfall. The other person, though, the experience was that my son died in an avalanche. And so when the person sees the painting, she starts crying. So perception, we have what we call the separate realities. And so we can say, well, if that's true, then how will we have the right perception so that I can, go on with my life and have an enhanced life? My thought is, if perception has to do with compassion, love, and abundance, no matter if it's looking at the picture or whatever it is looking at, it's healthy for us. There's a story that we can close with about 3 people who went on a hunting expedition. A psychologist, an engineer, and a minister. So they're on this hunting expedition, and it was in Canada, and the weather started turning pretty bleak. So they decided we need to find a cabin, and there was a cabin nearby that they had walked past. So they went and they knocked on the door, and nobody was there. So they opened the door and walk in, and they walk in and they're amazed. Here's this pot-belly stove that's suspended by lots of wires through the ceiling beams, just sitting there off the ground. Perception. Well, the psychologist said this. I know why he did this. It's because he's an isolated trapper who's lonely, and by raising the pot-belly stove up above the ground, he can get underneath it and vicariously experience being in the womb of his mother. Okay. The air engineer looked at it and said, nah, yeah, that's not correct. What's happened here is that he's studying thermodynamics. And therefore, he's raising this up so that there's an even heat throughout the building, and then he can experience the benefit of that. The minister said, no, you're both wrong. What it is that for decades, the idea of fire uplifted has been a religious symbol for higher consciousness for years. And this is a religious thing. And that's what's involved. In the meantime, while they're looking at this, the 3 of them, in comes the trapper. He's wondering what's going on here. And they said, we're glad you're here. We want to know, why did you raise this pot-belly stove with all these wires off the beam and it's sitting there? Why did you do that? He says, well, he said, I had lots of wire, but not enough stovepipe. And this may sound silly, but what's silly about it is we can go out here and have 10 different ideas of something. And they're not all bad, it's all okay. But when the idea goes across the line and is not compassionate, is not loving, and is not greater good for anyone, then it's time for us to make our renewal and transformation and get in line and be the magnificence that we really are. So it is. That's it.